Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and you are all in for a real treat today because we have on an incredible fellow entrepreneur who you're all going to fall in love with her story and how she has been at the collision in the intersection of two very different fields of expertise that she has and how she's baked all of that into a very brilliant and impactful business that is an infrastructure business powering so much good in the world. So let me introduce you to today's guest. Her name is Goddard. Megan is the CEO and co-founder of Kizuna, which is building the infrastructure for more equitable and intelligent background screening. With over a decade of experience spanning both criminal justice reform and HR tech, she brings both policy depth and product expertise to the future of hiring. She previously led product compliance at Checker and served as a director at the Center for Employment Opportunities, where she oversaw national re-entry programming. Her work has shaped industry-leading innovations, including automated expungement technology, science-backed risk assessments, and sophisticated rules automation systems. Involved in re-entry reform since her teenage years, Megan is driven by a singular mission: to create hiring systems that expand access to opportunity while strengthening trust and safety. I'm so excited to get in the mind of a brilliant founder. So let's dive straight into my interview with Megan Goddard. All right, Megan, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. So happy to be here.
Heck yes. I think it is so cool how you have found a way to really innovate in such a cool intersection of so much of what you care about and where your expertise lies. But Megan, before we jump straight into the business stuff, you've got to take us beyond the bio. Who's Megan? How did you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I, as you mentioned in my bio, have been passionate about this space since I was, 16 years old. In high school, I had a couple siblings deal with crippling drug addiction, and knowing how much I loved them and how much I wanted to care for them and not knowing how to, it made me really interested in what are the solutions for drug addiction out there. And so I started down that route, but pretty quickly as you go down that route, you learn about our justice system, because how a lot of America deals with drug addiction and mental health and poverty and many other societal issues is to lock people up, to criminalize their behavior. And so I was just kind of astounded that this was our response as a society to problems that everybody deals with the consequences for. And so I, being a huge nerd, became obsessed with learning more about our justice system and how we can do better for our neighbors and our family members and friends. And so I spent the next, 12 years learning about our justice system, researching international systems, learning about criminology, and that led me to a myriad of experiences, from teaching inside prisons and jails, working in reentry, and then eventually into the background screening space, which is, not a super sexy problem to be facing, but background screening is incredibly influential and consequential. Over 94% of businesses use background checks in their hiring process. 1 in 3 Americans have a criminal record. And so these decisions that they're making when they're reviewing background checks has huge consequences for job seekers, for companies, and for society at large. And I became obsessed with that decision-making point. How do employers and other types of businesses make good decisions when they're reviewing background checks? And that's what led me to starting Kizuna.
Yes, I love that background story, and we're definitely going to talk about Kizuna, but Megan, I cannot let you gloss over the fact that you didn't happen to just fall into this. This was a very conscious decision where you looked at the landscape of all the meaningful and impactful work that needs to be done across the landscape of all the various topics that we're touching on today, and you decided to be part of that solution. You and your team have obviously founded an incredible company, but I want you to take us back to that decision point where you said, I understand the landscape. I understand all the downstream effects of what background checks look like and how this impacts so many people, both employers and, of course, employees across the board. And you decided, I'm going to start something. I'm actually going to innovate and build something that's really meaningful here.
Yeah, so there are so many people now, thankfully, working on criminal justice reform. When I got started, it wasn't a very popular or trendy field to be in. But now, thanks to a lot of mass media and a lot of the news, and there's just a lot more awareness around the problems around our justice system. So there's a lot of people tackling the problems within it with really innovative solutions. But what I found was that background screening was not one that was really being targeted thoughtfully and intentionally. Background check companies go as far as they can to help with that decision-making process, but there's very clear constraints with how far they can go without stepping over their legal bounds, as they're meant to be neutral data providers, right? They go out, collect this data, give it to the employer, and they're not supposed to help them interpret it or decide what to do with it. And so it was this big problem, this big gap area that I didn't see other people tackling. And I never considered myself to be an entrepreneur. I always figured it'd be easier to work with companies that already had done the hard work of getting off the ground. But once I kept confronting this big gap area and seeing no one else tackling it, I just figured I had to do something.
Yeah, I love that entrepreneurial calling. And part of that is because of course, your strength of conviction. And you've already really highlighted for us how much of a personal connection there is. And you've dedicated your professional career to solving these really big problems. And we're so appreciative for the work that you do. And I would argue that it takes entrepreneurs to push the envelope and to innovate and to solve not just industry's problems, but societal problems. And I think that Kizuna is such a shining example of what that looks like on a societal level. Introduce listeners who aren't familiar with Kizuna just yet. I'm so excited for them to understand not only what it is, but really I want to get into that infrastructure piece, because I think it's such a brilliant way that you've structured it.
Yeah, so Kizuna is a decision intelligence layer for background checks. And that's just a fancy way of saying we help businesses make smarter and faster decisions when reviewing background checks. So you have the background check company that goes out and collects all this data, and that data can be really comprehensive. It can have a lot of legal jargon. Like if you're looking at someone's criminal record, it could say things like 11357, felony, guilty, all these scary words. And so what we do, we are that infrastructure that sits in between the background check company and the decision maker. And we ingest that data and we output very clean summaries, what the data means, what are the most important factors for decision makers to consider. Like there's a lot of legal and administrative jargon that doesn't really help them make good decisions, like address history and things like that. So we filter out all of that data and we flag the things that they care about and that matter. And so we have a bunch of different tools that sit in between that layer, including some compliance tools, as a compliance landscape for background checks is quite convoluted and complex. But that's the core idea, is how do we help businesses understand what this data means, and most importantly, what is relevant to them today.
Yeah, I really appreciate the way that you articulate that. And I will say, for our pre-production team, as soon as we came across your website, it's just so clear how mission focused and impact focused so much of your messaging is, and the way that you all articulate that. I want to pick on that infrastructure piece of it, because I feel like there were so many ways that you all could have decided, hey, we want this to just be a consumer meaning, of course, the businesses, consumer facing SaaS app, and we want to make it available to the masses. But there's a very intentional way in which you've structured that go-to-market strategy. Talk to us about that infrastructural role there.
Yeah, so the infrastructure piece was really important to us because as I mentioned, background checks are quite complicated and have a lot of data within them, and businesses already have their workflow that they're doing in an ATS system or HRIS system. They have all these platforms to help them make decisions when it comes to hiring in HR, and they're fatigued with all of these different platforms, and now AI is introducing all of this complexity, and so there's all of these different things that they have and different workflows. And so our core value add is how do we help them simplify their workflow? And so it was really important for us to be API first as a company. Any employer can plug us into any platform they're using. So whether that's a consumer reporting agency, their background check company, or an ATS system or HRIS system, wherever they're currently evaluating their candidates, they can easily plug in Kizuna, and so that they can see those clean summaries and outputs directly in the workflows that they're already used to. So that infrastructure, simplifying the compliance landscape and all of this data is core to the value add that we can offer them and helping them make fast decisions. Especially a lot of our clients are large, high volume employers, and so they don't have time to sign into all these different platforms and do all these things. So that simplification piece is really what we wanted to focus on.
Yeah, I really appreciate the intention that you've put behind the strategy there and how you share that with us. But Megan, I've got to put you on the spot here because very frequently I wonder, what do employers look for? And obviously as a business owner myself, frequently I even question, I'll happily raise my hand and say, I'm not sure what we're all looking for as far as a background check. It's never just a clear yay or nay. I mean, there's so many things to interpret. Talk to us about those outputs and that decision layer to help employers navigate a world that you have a lot of expertise here, but your average business owner and hiring manager, I question if we even know what we're looking for. So how do you guide us in that respect?
I love this question because employers are dealing with so many things when they're looking at a background check, especially for employers in America. There's so many things that they have to consider. Reputational risk, like if they hire someone and that person goes on to do something, especially if they're a public-facing company, then that situation can be in the news and it can lead to negative press, and that's really consequential. Of course, they care about the safety of their employees and their customers. If you're a large retail business, making sure your customers feel safe when they come into your store, that's really important. But also they have to think about the litigious nature of American culture. And so let's say they are too strict in their background check process. They can get sued for discrimination claims. If they're too lenient in their background check process, they can get sued for negligent hiring claims. And so there's just so much for them to think about. And so as you're looking at, as I mentioned earlier, this legal jargon, you're thinking like, what does this mean to me today? How do I weigh safety and hiring speed and compliance all at the same time? And so that background check review step, it takes them a long time because they have to be really thoughtful and intentional. And so historically, it has really slowed down the hiring process. And if you're a gig platform or a high volume employer, you don't have that time to do a really thoughtful review. And so Kizuna really helps them, again, simplify that process, only surface the data that matters to them, that's relevant to them. So you asked about what that decision intelligence layer involves. Part of our product is an automatic job relevance test. And so what that means is if you're an employer and you have different jobs that you're hiring for with different risk exposures. For instance, if you have your warehouse jobs, that's more of a low risk type of job because you're not dealing with people or vulnerable populations. But then you might have driving jobs. So there's folks on the road. You might have delivery drivers who are driving people. That has a very different risk exposure than your warehouse job, than your executive staff. And so what our rules automation does is allow them to set criteria for each of those different job categories and then auto-evaluate background checks against it. And so if you're hiring for a warehouse worker, we're only going to surface the records that are relevant to that job. If you're hiring for a delivery driver, we'll surface things like DUIs and driving related offenses that have a relevant risk exposure. And that is super novel in the space because historically employers have had to do that manually. They look at the background check, they look at their screening policy, which is like a spreadsheet, and they're trying to determine if it's relevant or not. And then recording it in their background check platform, it was a total mess. And so we simplify that process. We auto flag the things that they care about, and then we have everything in one place. So it's very easy for them to have a defensible audit trail. In the worst case scenario, if they need to defend their decision in a court, they can know that they have all of their audit trail in one place and a reason behind every single decision that they made.
It's really cool hearing about all these different moving parts because I was a math tutor in college, and so I love multivariate regression analysis because to me, when I get to sit behind a computer, and back then really the only tool we had was Microsoft Excel to do all of this multivariate regression, and it really struck me about how we as humans with human brains, how difficult it is to weigh up all these different factors and consideration sets, and the fact that you brought in even to the unique job role and job function that we are hiring for, a background check is only as pertinent as the context involved in the entire hire. And so I think it's really important that we consider all of those things, which my mind, obviously here in 2026, when I hear about all this context and all the multivariates that we have to consider, I go straight to AI. And Megan, I'm super curious your insights into the world of AI, because I can imagine ways where AI is making it easier to make sense of all of this context and all these variables. I can also imagine a world where, if not deployed correctly, it can actually lead to even less equitable outcomes. And there's so many considerations there. It's a lot to balance, Megan. You as the CEO and co-founder, I'm glad it's your problem and not mine, but walk us through the consideration sets there.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's a very careful line to toe of course, we're going to use AI. Everyone's going to use AI in their business. It'd be crazy not to. But how do we make sure we're using it for the right reasons and being mindful of all the AI and hiring laws and everything going on out there that are in place for a good reason? So we don't use AI for the decision-making step. We never automate rejections, which is a core critical piece of AI and hiring laws. Never leaving the decision-making moment to an AI bot. The employer or the business evaluating the background check will always be the ultimate decision maker. However, we do use AI for our evaluation engine. So ingesting all of that data and outputting clean results is something that we use AI for. We have an advanced machine learning model that takes a first pass at evaluating the data. And then we use large language processing for other parts of outputting that clean summary. And so we use AI sparingly, but again, never for the ultimate decision-making moment.
Yeah, I appreciate the intentionality that you put behind that. And I also think that in 2026, it's no longer a case. I think 2 years ago, a lot of people were bragging, oh, we don't use AI. Now it's a question of, well, why wouldn't you use AI? It's a very powerful tool. Use it thoughtfully, use it intentionally and carefully. And it's really cool to hear how you all behind the scenes have done that. I want to go back because earlier you brought up cultural considerations. And obviously so much of your business is focused on business here in the United States. But there's a bit of a cultural reference even in the name of your business. Kizuna obviously is a Japanese word. Take us behind the scenes about the naming of your company.
Yeah, I'm half Japanese, and Kizuna is a Japanese word that means mutual trust. Our mission is to really instill mutual trust in the hiring process. So right now, a lot of where trust breaks down is in that background check step. You have candidates who have gone through this lengthy interview and recruitment process, and background checks come at the final step because of ban-the-box laws, and for various reasons, it's the final step. And so if you're a candidate, you've gone through this whole process, you've been told that you're the right person for this job, given a conditional offer, and then you go through the scary background check process, then that's where trust starts to get a little scary. Employers are looking at your record. They don't know if they can trust you based off of things you've done in your past. As a candidate, you don't know if you can trust them to really see who you are, the person behind the criminal record. And so that's what we really want to do, is come in and help both parties be able to trust each other, be able to see each other for who they are, and know that you have the same goal in mind, helping qualified candidates get access to work when they deserve that job and they no longer pose a risk, and helping businesses feel confident in the decisions that they're making. And so that's the story behind Kizuna.
Yeah, I love that. We hear so frequently in the world of marketing about how important it is to embed so much of us, those unique differentiators. And Megan, it's really cool to see how you've really injected into your company in the way that explains and articulates your values as well as your personal background. I think that it's a really cool blend, and obviously it's trickled into all of the ways that Kizuna appears publicly, which I do want to talk to you as a fellow entrepreneur, not just the subject matter expert that you are. But when it came to launching Kizuna, you had so many executive decisions that you had to make and weigh up. Obviously, you've been very successful on the fundraising front, and I know that that is part of your strategy up to this point. Talk to us about how the entrepreneurial side, the more business side of this journey has been up to this point for you.
Yeah, I was very nervous about fundraising because I've never been in the VC world. I started in nonprofit and then I moved to the tech world, but never had to fundraise. But I was surprised at how smooth it went. I think because I'm so passionate about this space. I've been living and breathing it since I was 16. And my co-founders, who were my former colleagues, we all worked in the background check space for many years together. And so we were all very passionate about it. We're passionate about our mission. So it was so easy to talk about with VCs. And I think they loved that we're industry experts, because a lot of the time they're getting pitched by companies that built an AI app and they had this idea and they don't know too much about the problems that they're solving, or haven't had as much experience talking to the people impacted by those problems. But we have, and so we had so many stories that we could share. And I barely prepared a pitch deck before I started talking to VCs. And sometimes we didn't even go through the pitch deck because we just got lost in conversation. And so I think we talked to 10 VCs, so 8 traditional VC firms, and then 2 angels, and then we got 4 of them to say yes. And so I think that's a pretty high success rate compared to what I've heard in the entrepreneurship space. And really, I attributed it to just being so passionate about what we're doing. And I think the story really resonates because it's so impactful. As I mentioned, 94% of employers use background checks. 1 in 3 Americans has a record. And so I think it's something that everyone can resonate with because we're all impacted by these decisions that are made when it comes to background checks. So yeah.
Yeah, and Megan, you also alluded to the fact that you all are experts, which speaks to an incredible team that you've assembled. I think even just scrolling through your website, I will say it's so cool to see that you've been very intentional about scientific advisors, background check advisors, re-entry advisors. It seems like there's talent everywhere that someone can look. Obviously, you've got your co-founders, Igor and Tyler, as your CTO and your CLO. Talk to us about the team that you've assembled, because that's a big part of growing a business, is the people behind it.
I'm so glad you asked, because my team is what has made this journey so incredible. I'm absolutely loving working with Tyler and Igor, and my advice to anyone considering entrepreneurship is to really invest in finding the right team first and foremost. Tyler is an attorney, but he's the best kind of lawyer. He's not we can't do this, it's too risky. He's always like, let me educate you on the risk and let's figure out the least risky way to do this. He was the associate general counsel at Checker, so he's very familiar with the background check space, which is a very litigious space. And so having a legal expert there has been so incredibly helpful, especially when you're in conversations with customers, employers. Having a lawyer in the room is someone that they can trust. And so that's really essential for building that relationship with them. Igor is just like an insane mad genius. He is our CTO, our software engineer, the brains behind our product. And I can't express how I've never met anyone that his mind works so quickly. He understands problems so well. He always draws out on a piece of paper, traditional way, to explain the code that he's writing, so that Tyler and I can deeply understand our product and all the ins and out of it. They're just the best team. We all live remote from each other, but we all meet up in fun places around the world and really foster that relationship, because I think that's the bedrock for all of our success. And so, yeah, I absolutely love them. I love that they've been in this industry. I started off with a different co-founder, actually, who was less familiar with the background check industry, and that was really hard. And so we parted ways mutually, and I convinced Tyler and Igor to join me. And since then, it's been honestly smooth sailing.
Yes, I love that. It's always so cool to hear behind the scenes of the leaders that are innovating and pushing the envelope and doing such meaningful and impactful work. Megan, along those lines, I'd love for you to share with us a little bit about what that executive time looks like, especially considering the fact that you are all remote. You are all obviously interacting via the web with each other. And I would imagine a lot of Slack conversations, a lot of video conferences. What are those questions that come up in your executive time, especially knowing that you all serve in such different lanes, very important lanes that you've obviously strategically linked up people's expertise to. But what does that look like when you all get together? What are the questions that you're asking of each other? What is the timeline that you guys are looking at? Because in business, things can change very quickly. So I'd love for you to take us behind the scenes into your executive time.
Yeah, so almost all of last year, we got launched in February of last year, and almost all of last year was spent on product development and design. And so those leadership meetings were so fun. That's actually my favorite piece of entrepreneurship, is working on the product and building the solutions themselves. And so we would get together, we would whiteboard, we would brainstorm and figure out what are impactful ways to solve the problems we care about. We pilot tested it with employers, and that went so well. We pilot tested with background check companies to offer our service to their clients. And now that the product is fully built and functioning and launched, now so much of our conversations have been around sales strategy and go-to-market strategy. And so we primarily are focusing on channel partnerships because background check companies and ATS systems already have hundreds of thousands of clients using them. And so how do we add our product to their existing product layer, especially because there's such synchronicity in receiving their data, evaluating it, and then handing it off to the client. And so getting into their platforms has been our core sales strategy thus far, and that has been going super well. But yeah, most of the time when we're meeting these days, it's how do we get the word out about Kizuna, marketing through sales. I've never been in a super traditional sales role, so I'm learning a lot in that regard. I think once we get to the meeting, it's really easy for me to show off our product, to talk about how it's solving their problems, because I know that well. But the outbound sales strategy is so super new for me, and so I'm doing a lot of ChatGPT research and figuring out what we should be doing. And so that has been, I think, the biggest hurdle thus far, and what I'm spending a lot of these days researching.
Yeah, I love that. What a beautiful time to be alive, that we have AI as such a resourceful thought partner at our fingertips. And it's really cool hearing that evolution of product focus to distribution focus, which obviously that is one of, if not, I'm biased as a marketer, but probably the most important part of our products changing the world, is that if it's the coolest product in the world, but it's not in the hands of anyone using it, then it doesn't really make an impact. So I love that strong emphasis across the board. It sounds like all three of you, even in your different avenues, have that strong emphasis. And Megan, it also sounds to me like, with your CEO hat on, just how much you tend to embrace challenges. It sounds like you actually take delight in the things that you may not yet know and the things that you haven't yet experienced. Talk to us about what has been this most surprising part of the entrepreneurial journey for you up to this point.
Ooh, good question. I think one, I never thought that you could learn so much in a day. I had challenging roles in the past, and like you mentioned, I love being challenged. But entrepreneurship, every single day, I feel like I'm learning like 10 new things, which is crazy. Like, the learning curve is so steep, and that is so fun. I think for anyone considering entrepreneurship, you hear this statistic all the time that like 9 out of 10 startups fail. And I would just ignore that. I mean, it's good to be mindful that and to prepare for potential failures and ways to prevent them, mitigate that risk. However, I feel like I am learning so much, and it's building my character in ways I never could have imagined. And so for that alone, like, I highly encourage anyone who's considering it and that has a good idea to really go test it out and see if you have the resources to support yourself. It's such a privilege to be able to just dive into this crazy world of entrepreneurship. And I thought I would be so fixated on the challenges with background checks and criminal justice reform, but I'm learning challenges around, again, like sales and fundraising and team development, and how do we make sure that in a remote environment we're staying strong as a team, and being resilient. We've faced a lot of challenges already, and being resilient as a team is such a good such a good way to get stronger and to be able to prevent future mishaps and things. So I have loved the entrepreneurship journey, and I highly recommend it to anybody.
Yes, so well said. Although, Megan, you're making your life difficult, because with all of that good advice that you've shared with us, I have no idea how you're going to answer this final question, but it's super broad. I ask it at the end of every episode, and that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and knowing that you are one of us, you are very much a fellow entrepreneur, what's that one thing you want to leave them with today?
Hopefully this isn't contradictory to what I just said previously, but I think that if you're considering entrepreneurship, really pursue a problem that you're obsessed with. I know some people in my life who have embraced the entrepreneurship journey because they had a good idea, but they weren't so passionate about that idea. So when things got rough, and things will get rough because they always do in entrepreneurship, they didn't have enough of that internal intrinsic motivation to continue on. And I think, honestly, that's why 9 out of 10 startups fail, is because they get to this point where it's too challenging and they're like, why am I doing this? Am I solving meaningful problems? And so while it does push your character and you do grow a lot, I don't think you'll feel like it's worth it, that you have this intrinsic motivator, if you're not going to bed at night thinking about the problems and waking up or having dreams. I have dreams all the time thinking about background checks and the problems that we're solving. And so I think if you're obsessed with it, it's going to be so fun. You're going to learn so much. The solution is never going to be what you imagined it would be in the beginning. So don't get so tied and attached to that solution, but do get obsessed with the problem. And so, as I mentioned, I've been studying this since I was 16 and learning about criminology and the science and recidivism. And the more I learn, the more problems are uncovered and the more obsessed I become. And so I think that has made this whole process so much more interesting, intellectually stimulating, and just fun.
Yes, I love that advice for our listeners. And Megan, especially the fact that you ended on fun. And I think it's so important to remind ourselves that we started our entrepreneurial journeys because we care about this stuff. It should be fun. It shouldn't be something that drags us down. And the fact that you're dreaming about it, the fact that you go to bed thinking about it, wake up thinking about it, it reveals so much. And I'm so grateful that you have listened to those calls and fully stepped into your entrepreneurial journey with an amazing team behind you. And you all are literally building an infrastructure that changes the world in such a positive way. So I'm very excited for listeners to go and check out Kizuna and all the cool things that you all are up to. So for listeners who want to find you online, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Yeah, you could go to our website, kizuna.solutions, super easy. Or you can shoot us an email, sales@kizuna.solutions, and we'll be happy to give you a demo and nerd out on background checks with you.
Yes, and we are making it as easy as possible for you listeners to find that link down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. So if you're driving, don't worry about trying to remember that. You can click right on through from the show notes. Otherwise, Megan, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.